know that EGROW is a research-based policy think tank located in NCR, and the objective of EGROW was always to provide research-based policy advice to the government. We have been working with the government, with Niti Aayog. We have done projects for UNSCAP and other places, in other ministries, as well as other parts, other institutions across the world. When we established EGROW in 2018, our objective was very clear. We wanted to bring in, through research paper, through discussions, seminars, webinars, the best minds across the world to discuss issues which are relevant for India and to share India's experience for issues which are relevant for the world. That was the objective. And when COVID happened, we shifted to webinars in a very big way. We have done more than 210 webinars. Most of these webinars are on contemporary economic issues, but we have also developed and delved into geopolitics, into social economic issues as well as poverty, and sometimes exclusively defense related issues. That is the expertise of the members of the think tank. We have been very fortunate. We have had Nobel laureates come and speak to us. Mike Spence is coming next week. And 2 weeks after that is Professor Nanak Kakwani, an authority, global authority on poverty. We have been very fortunate. Nobel laureates have come and spoken to us in the past, and in the future we are expecting, as I mentioned. We have had a blend of Indian scholars and global scholars to come and speak to us, a very good blend that we have been able to maintain. And the type of issues that we have covered have also been very intense. We were part of the think tank exercise under the G20, which India hosted under its presidentship last year. We did a series of talks on new international economic order. We have done series of talks on climate, and we have done series of talks on women empowerment, all under the G20. And we'll continue to do that despite the fact that Brazil is in the presidentship of the G20. So to that extent, we have been contributing towards policy making in our country and also contributing towards global knowledge, sharing India's experience. Today, we are starting a new series. The objective of the think tank was to establish itself as a premier think tank in South Asia and also serve as a lighthouse for the least developed countries. Our today's series starts with Russia. We plan to follow it up with other SAARC countries, countries in South Asia, and countries in our region. I'll keep you all informed and posted as this happens, but one talk on these lines every month. Today's topic is with Russia. We have all grown up in our country on literature from Russia, reading about Leningrad and Moscow and Tashkent. And I understand even in Russia, Indian movies have also been very, very popular and good viewership. That relationship which goes between Russia and India, it was just not because of economic ties or defense ties or in recent months oil. No, the relationship between Russia and India has been very strong and over generations. As a matter of fact, my own interaction with Russians in person since 93 onwards, while I was doing my PhD abroad, has been instant and like a brother. So you instantly connect with because of, as I told you, sharing of literature and social things between the two countries. These days, there has been, quote unquote, a reinvention of relationship, and oil played a very prominent role in that. That's why we thought we will start the series with interaction with Russia, and we requested the Russian embassy to help us with a good speaker. And we were very fortunate that they recommended the name of Professor Valerija, who kindly consented to be with us and speak on this. In our own country, General Rajeshwar has been an expert with us, speaking to us about various things. And Ambassador Varma, of course, was an ambassador at Russia and therefore being here with us. And we knew that he can help us in understanding this depth of relationship that's emerging now. Let me introduce you to the chair of the session today, Ambassador Varma. Was a member of the Indian Foreign Service from 1988 to 2021. During his diplomatic career, he has worked in the Ministry of External Affairs, in the Office of External Affairs Minister and the PMO. He has served as India's ambassador at different places and to the Russian Federation. He has more than 12 years of experience in the field of multilateral non-proliferation and disarmament, nuclear, chemical, biological, and conventional weapons. He was a key member of the Indian negotiating team involved in the civil nuclear initiative with the US. During his tenure as director in the PMO during 2004 to 7, and as a member of Indian delegation to Conference on Disarmament and as Joint Secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs. He was the first recipient of the SK Award for Excellence in the Indian Foreign Service in 2011 for his contribution to the negotiations of the Civil Nuclear Initiative. With this, I hand over the session to Ambassador Varma to chair the session and conduct the proceedings further. Ambassador Varma.
Thank you very much, Dr. Charan Singh. Thank you very much to EGROW Foundation for this initiative to invite all of us, including me, to spend time together on a topic of continuing importance and interest to all those who have joined us today, which is India-Russia relations. Of course, these are old, time-tested relations, and these go back many, many decades. We have a long tradition, an unbroken tradition of friendship between our two countries. We call it the Special and Privileged Strategic Partnership. That is the nature of the relationship. But of course, the relationship today has to be assessed against the background of a very complicated international situation where the conflict amongst the big powers is rising. There are grave challenges to globalization. There is weaponization of interdependence, sanctions of various types. There is a move away from unipolarity to multipolarity. More and more countries are eager to contribute to how the world should be governed, should be taken forward. The rules made in the past need not necessarily be the rules of the future. So therefore, both in a bilateral context and in a multilateral context, we have India and Russia have a lot to do with each other, a lot that they can work together on and to support each other, and also shape the international agenda, so to speak. The conflict in Ukraine is now, of course, in the third year, and it is but natural that a conflict of this nature will have implications not just on the battlefield, and the battlefield is not just on the ground in Ukraine. It has many dimensions, an economic dimension, a financial dimension, transport, economic links have been disrupted, a huge impact on global commodities, food, fertilizer, energy resources, commodities of various types. The banking system is under great stress, quite apart from the tragic loss of life that this conflict entails. It is also a conflict not just between Russia and Ukraine. It appears to be a conflict between Russia and the broader West. And the West has a very strong impact on the global economic situation. And that the economic consequences of that have spread far and wide. It is, of course, only to be expected that India-Russia relations will be impacted somewhat by the conflictual situation in the world. And these impacts are ongoing. But it is also a testimony to the strength of our relations, that India-Russia relations have been consolidated, have been able to withstand the pressure. But having said that, I think it is unrealistic to think that India-Russia relations would be completely unaffected. What we used to do in the past, India-Russia relations in the past, will have to be modified and taken forward in the future, reformed, reconstructed, re-strengthened, and in a sense renewed for the future. So the current situation is both a challenge and I think an opportunity. There are two main dimensions of this: the bilateral economic relations, as also the larger India-Russia defense relations, against the background of the international situation. We have with us today two excellent speakers who have kindly consented to make presentations and speak to us each for about 25-30 minutes. We have Dr. Valerija Mincicova from Russia. She is an eminent economist. She works as the Deputy Dean in the Financial University of the Russian government. She is an expert on fields of world economy and also energy markets and risk management. And all these three factors are of great importance to what we are discussing today. So I would then first request her to speak. Then I will turn to Dr. Lieutenant General P.S. Rajeshwar, who is one of our senior most military people in our country, a very respected commentator. He had a very distinguished career in the Indian Army, having held very important positions, including the Integrated Chief of Staff Committee and also the Andaman and Nicobar Joint Forces Commander-in-Chief. He's also contributed a lot to the public debate in India on military matters, a very respected officer whose views are always very balanced and very perceptive. I will first turn to Valerie to make her presentation. I understand she has a PowerPoint presentation. We will soon thereafter request General Rajeshwar to speak. And once the two speakers have spoken, then I would then open up the floor for comments and questions. I would request that those who wish to pose questions or make comments, please make them in a succinct and a brief sort of way. And if you are asking a question, please also indicate whether which of the two speakers you would like the question to be addressed to. At the end of the session, I would try to see if I can summarize the broad trends of the discussion, and then I will hand it over to our very gracious host, Dr. Charan Singh, who's been most kind this evening to put us all together So a warm welcome to everyone, and I would like to now turn the floor to Valerija. I will also switch off my video because, in a sense, it helps in the transmission of the video program. And of course, I will be listening in, and I will join in as soon as you have completed your thing. Valerija, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Varma. I hope that everything will go well. Just a second. I will download my presentation for you to be able, to list it and to see whether it's happening. So can you see the slides?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Yes, it's very clear.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Singh, and thank you, Dr. Varma. So first of all, I want to greet everyone and to thank you for the opportunity and confidence that you give to Financial University. And this first slide represents our name in Russian. So to be, a little bit exotic to see the name of the Financial University under the government of the Russian Federation and to see actually which institution I represent. First of all, I want to confess that I admire and I'm fascinated with the Indian culture. Me, myself, I do yoga, like twice or 3 times a week if I have the opportunity. And while being an economist, I try to understand those economic relations, those bilateral, of course, economic relations through the prism of culture, through the prism of mentality of the 2 countries. And I can't find the reasons why this cooperation can't go on. So our 2 countries have a lot of things to share from the experience being the biggest. India in the population, in the question of population, and Russia in the question of territory. And I have certainty and believe that this cooperation will happen and will grow only as fixed and proclaimed by our powerful and professional leaders, our president, President of Russia, Mr. Putin, President of India, Mrs. Murmu, and Prime Minister of India, Mr. Modi, who already represented that we are going to have this strategic partnership for a long time. So let's start with a little bit boring figures, but which will illustrate the trends, which are more interesting, much more interesting, as was already told us by Dr. Varma. We really had a very long history of relations, but due to the official statute of our countries, we could not have they organized like in diplomatic way. And after India gaining independence, Soviet Union and Russia as the heir of the Soviet Union had those relations very close. So after the Second World War, we had tight relations in external trade and in technological exchange and all other stuff which is connected with those 2 principal types of international economic relations. So hereby I try to give you a very brief, a list of what was exported from Soviet Union to India and vice versa. So you know that, of course, as it is mentioned here, the fast-moving consumer goods, which I mentioned on the bottom of the slide, of course, they were not called like that, but practically that was it. And that means that already in Soviet time for us and during the period before 2000s for India, we had those external trade rather diversified, first of all, and we used lots of value added in those merchandise which were exported. And to see and to illustrate the fact that our external trade, was quite important for both sides, I give you here the curves, the 2 curves, which show the blue line for the share of Russia or Soviet Union in the Indian export, and the orange curve shows the share of Russia or Soviet Union in the Indian import. And you see that in the peak year, in the local maximum in 1981, it was very close to 20%. So once 1/5 of all Indian export went to Soviet Union. And I'm sure that it is a trend that can be followed, and that can be followed after all the shocks that we have experienced. And those shocks are practically given on the timeline. I didn't mention on purpose, I didn't mention the global problems like pandemic, like financial crisis of the year 2008 and 2009. I tried to mention what was important for our two countries. So the default in Russia in 1998 and the same sanctions problem, sanctions trouble, which was caused by the nuclear bomb tests in India. Of course, it reduced the volume of our external relations, but it was restored rather fast. And already 2 years later, the declaration on the India-Russia strategic partnership was signed, and in 10 years, it became the partnership of other quality, which was already mentioned. And of course, in 2022, we know that our geopolitics changed forever, I think, but we need to find what is going to be next and how we can manage with that later on. So as for actual figures, which are given on this graph, I give you their volume of exports in billions of dollars, but it is equivalent of billions of dollars. And I should mention that because our bilateral trade is happening in other currencies, not only dollar, US dollar, and I will also give the list of those currencies which are given, and their export of India to Russia. And you see that it is usually the profited for Russia on Russian turn, which is dictated mostly nowadays by the oil flow. And in 2022, a great oil flow went to India because their Western sanctions were imposed on Russia. And nowadays, you know, they speak of the secondary sanctions, but I hope that they will never touch Indian economy. Otherwise, the rest of the world will suffer as well. And we will discuss it a little bit later. I have some certain information concerning that fact. So as to speak of the bilateral trade in the merchandise scope, in the items scope, what is exported, it is given on the slide. So you can see that practically the export orientation of both countries is reflected in the list of merchandise which are sold from Russia to India and from India to Russia. And you know, this trend, it exists for decades. So, for example, Russia being the holder of most part of the natural resources of the world, especially hydrocarbons, of course, we export lots of these products to India and to other countries as well. But the specialization for certain country, for India, it is electrical equipment, fertilizers, which are well done in Russia, first of all, and very helpful in the Indian agriculture, and also pearls, jewelry, and steel as one of the merchandise which is produced in Russia in a great amount. And as for India, I'm sure that the value added which was given inside the country is also exported because of the very high quality and because it is needed, and we can't replace it from India. So the export-import structure is very diversified, and those principal exported goods with both high and low value added, in which we specialize, are also represented here, and it is going to diversify even more after years, because we've got new opportunities, new technologies, and new workforce as well. So the trends of these 700 years close alliance is that now in 2023, in 2022, and I hope that in the current year we will have the same situation, that Russia is India's 5th largest trading partner, which we are very proud of. India is Russia's 12th largest trading partner, but it only concerns the fact that the amount in money is like that, not because we're not interested in this cooperation. And this disbalance is one of the questions that should be decided while the business missions, while G2G cooperation, and while the base for the legislation. So bilateral trade, as I told and I promised to show you, is now executed not only in US dollars, but also in renminbi, in Chinese national currency, in the dirhams of Arab Emirates, and of course in rupees and in rubles. And that means that that will also change the structure of currency reserves of both countries, and it already changes it. When I will be speaking about primary and secondary sections, which now concern the Russian economy and the Indian economy, you will see that structure. So the aim of both governments, this bilateral aim, is to have the minimum of the $30 billion of volume in 2025 in the year, which we will see only in half a year. So practically we already reached this sum, and I think that the volume will also grow. So the proficit in Russia's favor, that is the trend which I also should mention. And again, I believe that business community and governments are also trying to diversify the export and to grow the volume even more to, decrease this proficit, because mutual trade, it always should be, balanced. So the item structure is diversifying and principal goods stay the same, and the tariffs in trade are decreasing. And you see this average, which I have checked with the WTO database. So they are decreasing, and the free trade area, if it ever happens between the Eurasian Economic Union, you know that Russia is the member and the one of the biggest players of the 5 countries on the former Soviet place. We exist and we act all together. So India is now on negotiations of creating this free trade area with our 5 countries, including Belarus, Armenia, Kyrgyzstan, and so on. So you know it even better than me. So concerning the investments, of course, if we speak of economic relations, we can't say that we're not the participants of the investment of the capital movements. So before the pandemic, those volumes were quite high. Actually, this data varies a lot. And capital flows has a net balance in which Indian cumulative foreign direct investments are much higher than those of Russia. And what is most important for us, that the Indian investors, Indian companies prefer hydrocarbons sphere and their processing in Russia. That is quite obvious, and the project in the Far East that we have for the oil and gas, Sakhalin 1, where we have this liquefying of the natural gas plant, and where we extract gas and oil. Of course, it is one of the most interesting spheres for foreign investors, and I see that is a great interest for that sphere. But it is disbalanced in this term, so the Indian investments in the Russian economy practically are bordered by only the sphere of the hydrocarbons. As for Russia, Russian investments in India, they are not also too diversified, but still Russian companies, Russian investors prefer to put their money into automobile industry and in telecommunications. So these are the spheres which are highly developing in the Indian economy. So the aim of the volume for investments is $50 billion, is even more than for trade, for the bilateral external trade. So I believe that this volume is already got, and it will even grow, as it is shown by the situation for now. I tried to find out which companies are the greatest investors, the biggest investors in both economies, and I hope that you know the brands, you know the names. If not, we will know them for now. As for Indian companies in Russia, I know them all because I try to keep in touch with all the energetic matters concerning different parts of the world. So OVL, BPCL, and all those companies are the great players on the energy market. And it is obvious that they will have the opportunity to invest because they have the support of government, because they have the support of capital. And this diversified structure on the left side of my slide, which will show you the major Russian investors in Russia, they try to manage not only in hydrocarbons, which is the main sphere of the external trade, but also in high tech, also in services like banking, for example. Yeah, and of course, as was mentioned not once and will be mentioned not once today, in the military sphere and in the peaceful atom, nuclear power, and the sustainable development of our economies as well. So that was about the figures of capital and trade movement. But when we speak of the economic relations, we can't not touch the question of the workforce. And here I tried to give you the principal data from the Migration Organization of UN, how much migrants do our economies have. And you see that India, having the largest population in the world, is not very flooded with the migrants. But I know that there are the questions that arise with the workplaces. Otherwise, in Russia, migrants are very welcomed because our fertility rate is rather low. It is around 1.9 births per woman. Not births, but lives, yeah. So we're in deep need of the workforce and of qualified workforce. And it is one of the directions for Russia-India bilateral relations, which we need to discuss, which we need to develop, to see how we can manage with the problems which are beneficial for the both sides. So you see the actual blue rectangle, which shows us that Indian workers can find high-paying jobs in Russia. Simply that, by studying here, then working here, and sending their remittances back to their family and to their economy, as well as taxes. And as for migration, it is always connected with academic mobility. And principally, we're doing partially this right now, because I'm sure that many representatives now of the Indian community and Russian community are the representatives of the higher education institutions. So in 2022, there were around 17,000 students from India, which studied in Russia. Mostly they study medicine. Mostly they study healthcare system and how to work with the health of the people. In 2023, this volume was even more, around 22,000 students. And I'm sure that these programs of academic mobility of the students and of studying abroad have a very nice perspective. Our two countries have the roadmap for the scientific, technological, and innovations cooperation in multiple spheres, like agriculture, like physics, and like such not new but very perspective spheres of astrophysics, of quantum science, and of course of healthcare, which was mentioned before. So this professional exchange and scientific exchange should go on, and we are actually doing that now. And I hope that it is not, regular, but one-time webinars and so on. So this cooperation is lasting and is improving and is going to be more multiple. For the framework of legislation, Mr. Varma already mentioned the special and privileged strategic partnership, which is the status of our relations right now, officially registered in 2010. We've got the Intergovernmental Commission on the G2G level, with the two subcommissions of trade, economic, scientific, technological, and cultural cooperation, and of course the next, not civil, but military sphere. And this cooperation, I'm sure, will be covered later very carefully. So Russia and India Trade and Investment Forum is a B2B initiative where the countries work, the businesses cooperate, the businesses find the paths how to not only make the trade develop. It is not only the question of trade, of selling and buying things from each other. It is the question of exchange in professional experience. It is the question of exchanging of technologies. And of course, the ministerial and presidential meetings are one of the mechanisms, one of the paths that will help this cooperation to stand and to develop even more. In our bilateral cooperation, bilateral relations, we've got the barriers of sanctions against Russia, first of all, and hereby I gave you this some infographics, which it is very popular in the Russian data, in Russian mass media, when for the first time in the history, you know, Russia is becoming more under sanctions than the countries which have been under sanctions for like centuries, you know, not like centuries, decades, let it be so, which are military active, which have problems with that. But the question is that this amount of thousands of sanctions by the target of Russia from the Western countries, it is shown because it is counted for physical persons as well. And that's why this awful figure has appeared on the international statistics. Anyways, primary sanctions which are against Russia, which target Russia, remap its trade. And that means that the partners, that the stand partners like India, which we have for decades, will gain from that. But this problem of the secondary sanctions, which United States are very fond of, made India diversify its imports, its logistics. And just a day ago, I tried to find out if this problem of how they call it, oil laundering by India, which is executed by India of Russian energy for European Union. I can say that because it is not truth. First of all, if you buy something from stand partner, as it was said by our president, that India is executing independent foreign policy. India decides itself what it is going to buy and what it is going to sell. You know, I hope that those secondary sanctions will not touch your economy, because you are quite neutral, because Indian government is quite neutral to the conflicts like that. And as for the conflict of Russia with the Ukraine party, we will speak of it a little bit later. I'm not, you know, the specialist in the military sphere, but our economic, of course, it suffers, but it still stands and will stay. And we are totally sure, because it is shown after 2 years of the sanctions pressure. So due to diplomatic efforts, India is not experiencing those secondary sanctions, but have this problem at it. And as I see, and as I say on the presentation, both countries only win, only gain by adapting to new normal. And this new normal existed after the pandemic, shortly after the pandemic, and now during the geopolitical restructure, remapping of the world. So we live in the world when we are not sure what is going to be next. We are not sure what we have as a black swan or the gray rhino. We do not know what will happen next and in which part of the world. And that will mean that this uncertainty is our new normal. So we are totally prepared for that, because we are trained by the history, by the economic history. Another question, another trend in our bilateral relations and the relations of the global south, as we are called altogether right now, it is the de-dollarization of our trade, de-dollarization of our economy, official reserves, and so on. Here I give you the short diagram where the export payments structure of Russia is shown, and you see that reserve currencies, United States dollar and euro, are used in less than a half. And in 2023, it will be even less. And actually, that is more safe for an economy to use other currencies than only one mono-oriented, not multilateral, but mono-oriented currency in their payments. And as for both of our countries, this is the question of official reserves in BRICS. Actually, I counted, according to the data of the International Monetary Fund, what is the amount, what is the share of official foreign reserves by currency in the year 2024 right now. So in the United States dollar, we have only 54%. In comparison, only a decade ago, it was higher than 80%. We still have the reserves, the official foreign reserves in euros, in yuans, in renminbis, in Chinese national currency of 2%, which share is already the same as Australian dollar, as Canadian dollar, and the other currencies, which includes Russian rubles and Indian rupees, is already close to 3.5%. So that will mean that this mono orientation will end someday. And as for the official reserves in, international credits, which are given by the New Development Bank, and we know that it is oriented for the projects which are developed in the BRICS countries, they are given in national currencies as well. I also counted that share of the 100 projects which are already supported by the New Development Bank, and I can say that US dollar is used in 61% of their projects, euro in 9%, and the second place go to Chinese yuan already. 16.5% of the projects are credited in yuans. In African rands, 3.6%, and in Indian rupee, 0.3% of projects, around $100 million equivalent. But anyway, it already exists in today's world, in today's reality. So we are moving to de-dollarization slowly, step by step. And we're going to have that. I also am very fond of the program of Make in India, which was launched in 2014, of creation of those production hubs in India. And now I try to emphasize if there can be hubs like that with Russian capital, raw materials and stock, if it can increase manufacturing growth, which already happening in the Indian economy, which has a great boost of the programs of Mr. Modi, stimulating infrastructure development as well, because it is highly needed in such a developed in the infrastructural way country like India, and of course the simplifying of doing business, so we're not afraid of doing business with India anymore. The same thing for Russia. We've got such a program, such a brand of the voluntary certification. It doesn't mean that it is the same aim of that program. It is not concerning the hubs, it is concerning of the exports of our goods, but with the voluntary certification of the Russian Export Center. And I'm sure that those who worked with the Russian exporters or Russian partners know about their experience, about what they do. And I believe that I can't stop but mentioning the future of the multilateral cooperation, not only bilateral, but the paths, the organizations which we have in common, the Emerging Seven, which is now already exceeding G7 by the GDP, the BRICS, of course, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is growing, and the G20 as well, where not only global South countries are the members, but also the developed ones. And I'm sure that this multilateral cooperation places where we can discuss the future policy of the two countries. And I try to also emphasize the attention to the future of the cooperation in the sphere, in the industry's scope. Of course, we're going to speak a lot about space. We're going to exchange a lot of technologies in nuclear power, in transport, in the sustainable development, which is still on the agenda of today's world. And it is important for India and for Russia, as we are used to using traditional hydrocarbons. So we are trying to move to renewable resources, and we have the opportunity to do that. And of course, in the sphere of energy, which is closely connected with the sustainable development, because with such a population and such manufacturing like our countries have, of course, we can't avoid the question of energy safety for the whole economy itself. And to sum up, I tried to list the points which will concern the future cooperation. Of course, it is the free trade area between India and the Eurasian Economic Union, which is under negotiations right now, but it has been, not halted, but there is a pause in those negotiations due to several agreements which should be discussed concerning workforce. It is the B2B cooperation, of course, including women entrepreneurship and bilateral roadshows and exhibitions. And I'm very happy that India is as well, oriented for their equality of women and men, because we have different opportunities, different talents and so on. But anyways, we have that opportunity to speak on the same level. Arctic area and Northern Sea route, which is interesting for everyone because we can't use only Suez Canal for our transportation, Panama Canal and so on. Their multimodal transport corridor from the Baltic Sea to the Indian Ocean, which is called North-South, which is now quite developed by the Russian government, by the Russian business, slowing of Chinese economic development, which is the closest neighbor and the closest partner for India and as well for Russia. Multilateral world with new leaders, which we discussed a lot, and of course the regional cooperation, I mean interregional, the states of India and the regions of Russia, and I know that it is a great interest in the Far Eastern Initiative, which is now going on. So anyways, to finish, I'm sure that strategical mutually beneficial partnership will be on and will stand for our countries in the future. So thank you, I have finished.
Thank you very much for the overview of India-Russia economic relations, both the past and the present. And we noted very carefully some of the areas in which you have highlighted where future progress can be made, should be made to transform our relations. I'm sure all our viewers would have been greatly informed by your very clear, thorough presentation. And we will return to the substance of your presentation during the discussion period. Let me now turn to General Rajeshwar to make his comments. Sir, please go ahead.
Thank you, Ambassador Venkatesh Varma, and thank you, Dr. Valerija, for your presentation. It's also my privilege to thank the EGROW Foundation. What I'll do is, since I'm covering more of the Russia-India economic prospects through a prism of war and its implications. So I will touch on 4 points of this so-called quadrilateral. One is the traditional defense relations, which is the platform. What impact has the ongoing war made on it? How has the defense industrial complex, from my readings, done in Russia, and then how is it looking in the future? As we know, the traditional defense relations have endured geopolitical turbulence over the last 7 decades, whenever that has occurred. And the war in the last 25 months or so has tested these relations over this entire period. As far as the defense industrial complex is concerned, in the last 3 decades, it has actually added to our military might as it had in the erstwhile, USSR. It has provided us the backbone of our military strength. And finally, in the future, as you all have already pointed out, in a world between orders, what counts or what would count perhaps, would be the way we tackle our respective challenges as we pursue our strategic interests. Right. Next, please. May I have, yeah. So what I'm looking at initially in the traditional defense relations, and I'm thankful to Ambassador Venkatesh for having put out this on the 50th anniversary. The first point, like he said, I think, was that this was the most consequential international treaty of the times and an inflection point. But I'll go back a little more. As far as the militaries were concerned, I think it all started in early 60s when Soviet Union was the first to give us defense technology and introduced us to the MiG-21 and the co-production and transfer of technology. But then there were two strategic points. One was the Tashkent talks of 65, which also affected the war towards the peace that ensued after the war, and the Indo-Soviet Treaty of Friendship and Cooperation, which technically actually worked over 2 years from 69 to 71 and provided the basis of our victory over Pakistan and the liberation of Bangladesh. So as it went along towards the end of the decade, from 79 and then to 85, a lot of mechanized forces operations and thought process for the armed forces happened in India. And the purchase of T-72 tanks and BMP-2s, which were the infantry combat vehicles, accelerated this. After, of course, 1992, there was a lot of joint research and development and indigenous production, which was allowed, of the T-72M, the BMP-2s, and upgradations on the MiG-21, then MiG-27, and finally the Su-30 MKI aircraft. We are aware after 1998, the next point was 2000, where the strategic partnership took place. We also added on with the purchase of T-90 tanks and introduced the Smerch rocket systems in our inventory. One of the major acquisitions was the repurposing of the Admiral Gorshkov aircraft carrier, and of course the project on the Kilo class submarines. The partnership got strengthened strategically, and the next in line was the BrahMos missile system, which has become the new model right now, where it is being made in India, and it's a JV, and it is also being exported from India. And of course, there has been a series of the nuclear powered attack submarine leasing. So the Chakra 2 series is here, and maybe we'll get on to the 3 in a year or so. But 2018 onwards, there was the S-400, the purchase of 5 systems. What I know from the open media is I think 3 are already in, and 2 should be there very shortly. Then, of course, there was the stealth frigates and a JV for the making of AK-203 rifles, which is 39 millimeter in length. So this actually, overall, when you look at it, it has all these purchases and the defense relations have resulted in a heavy impact of doctrine, operations, and training as far as Air Force, Army, and Navy have been concerned. So that is what has happened. And we have also learned a lot in the employment and utilization of weapon systems of Russian origin. Right. Maybe move to the next slide, please. Okay, so what is next is how has the war gone from a military perspective, and then what are its ramifications on the defense industrial, complex and exports. So to start with, our reading of the war is that, Russia has been able to capture large parts of 4 oblasts in Ukraine. So Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson. And of course, the operation is still going on. The capture of 2 points, Bakhmut and Avdiivka, have actually accelerated their operations now. And what is in the offing is an offensive this summer. There's, of course, a huge differential which is going on in terms of both manpower and the availability of equipment and ammunition, which is 6 to 10 times in the favor of Russia vis-a-vis Ukraine, notwithstanding the Western support to it. So basically, the war sustenance has become, and resilience has become, a major aspect. The Russian armed forces have also learned a lot from the weapons, equipment, and ammunition utilization and employment. So battlefield testing has gone on. The armed forces have expanded and they have also reorganized. When you come to the next part of it, what you're looking at was after Crimea and before, in the run-up to the war, the Americans had introduced the sanctions of CATSA. That, of course, dried up a lot of deliveries and payments. So, in the war, the first thing that happened was the weapons, equipment, and ammunition got depleted due to a surge in consumption by the Russian armed forces, which is something which is natural. And I'll perhaps go ahead and explain how that has happened. But we also added, since bulk of this went to the Russian armed forces, there was a constraint in maintaining deliveries. And the consequence was that the orders also kind of reduced as a result. What has happened, if you look at the left, is you will see that Russia share of global arms exports have dipped almost by 53%. If you look at the last 5 years, which is 19 to 23 and includes 2 years, almost 2 years of war, compared to the previous 5 years. But yet, India, it contributes to about 34% of India's exports or imports from Russia. But what we are seeing overall, because of the war, is that whatever equipment which is there and war-making material, the Russians have a better understanding than almost everybody today in the world, and that will count as we go forward. Next, please. Okay, so when you look at the defense economics and the industrial complex, my data is from the IISS, which has said that over 2 years, it has, the defense spending for Russia has gone from about 5.1 to 10.3 trillion rubles, which translates basically between $74 billion to $117 billion. This, of course, is as per the data which is available. And this is also pretty axiomatic. What is also likely is that initially, when the legacy equipment was there as a reserve, a lot of equipment got consumed. But then there are reports which says that a 24/7 production was ramped up, almost 7 days a week. A lot of manpower got shifted from private and public, industries into making both artillery shells, which we are told the capacity has gone between 100,000 to 200,000 per month, and also 100 to 150 tanks per month. So this is what has happened. And also, of course, a lot of friends of Russia have contributed to giving the war-making material to Russia. So these three things have happened. Manpower and efforts have also got diverted, as I said, to sustain the war requirement. So in all, if it is not a completely, war economy, it is definitely a partial war economy. Also, what has happened is based on what was available and what was coming in as far as supplies is concerned for the war, operational calibration took place on the front. Then also as an output, when you look at the previous orders, there was a decline in deliveries. So that is natural. And the orders from 2022 onwards have also shrunk. The data on the left is from a website of Perun, who shows that Russia has gone down. Earlier, it was in the second place or third place at times. It's gone down to the fifth, roughly, both in deliveries and orders. So that is the impact that. But it is also remarkable that they've been able to maintain that. And there are, of course, reports that Russian production in many spheres which are not under war conditions is still going on. So that is also quite remarkable. The defense industrial complex obviously would have expanded, got modernized. It would also be, once the war ends, of course, it's not very clear right now, since it's a protracted war, will have overcapacity. So that is, that will push it to export. Okay. And all this has happened in the face of technological sanctions. So there's been a lot of innovation and adaptation to making defense equipment. So that is the, big takeaway, which maybe even India will have to, do going forward. In the meanwhile, the Russian oil supply, of course, as you had already brought out, increased our trade to almost $50 billion. So that is a huge element, and taken over what was earlier a lot of trade on defense equipment. It has dwarfed that completely. Payment issues, as we all know, persist, but they are being managed from time to time. So what is the future board for us? Yeah, next, please. First thing is, I think the big aspect is, the biggest thing that I see is the strategic engagement. And this, to my mind, its value far exceeds the value of anything else, which is transactional. And the strategic engagement helps us balance interests in our neighborhood, where we have two adversaries right next to us. So this I think trumps everything. What are we looking for when we look at defense equipment and technologies? The Russian defense industry is quite far ahead. Aircraft technologies like MiG-31 series and the MiG-41 also, which is a sixth generation fighter which they are attempting. So that is one. The second is, of course, subsurface, which is nuclear submarines or nuclear powered submarines. So that is second. Then we are looking at air defense and electronic warfare systems, which has turned the tide in the, Russia-Ukraine war. So that has, they have really innovated and have come up with new solutions. To add to this are drones and missile systems, which the Russians, possess tremendous technologies in that. Then, of course, space, whether you look at the Gaganyaan project, where our cosmonauts have trained with you all for almost 13 months, or you're looking at the military aspects of space, which can happen as we go forward and will be something that we would be keen to learn on. So that would be one. Then, of course, like you've already, Dr. Valerija, you have pointed out the JVs with the Indian defense manufacturers. So for our Atmanirbhar Bharat scheme, that gives us a lot of encouragement as to learn from your experience as what to do and how to, innovate and adapt at lower costs, which is key for our, industry. And then, of course, since there is already a lot of dependency as far as arms are concerned, ammunition is concerned, spares are concerned, that also gives us another avenue of cooperation and support. So overall, I think the future looks, quite important and bright as far as the engagements are concerned. Okay, last slide, please. So this is something which our Honorable Prime Minister said when the engagement with the President happened in December 2020. And this, of course, he very clearly outlined the strategic trade and investment, energy, connectivity, defense, science and technology, and cultural cooperation, all of which have actually have been covered today. So I think there's going to be a lot more than what's there now once the war comes to an. But for sure, the war has had tremendous implications on the Russia-India economic prospects. Thank you. Here I land.
Thank you very much, General Rajeshwar. I think we've had an excellent presentation on the India-Russia defense relationship against the background of the larger international context of the Russia-Ukraine war, but also India-Russia economic relations. I think the two are intertwined. I think the importance of General Rajeshwar's presentation is that he is very succinctly analyzed both the impact of sanctions, but also analyzed the changes in the military situation on the battlefield and the changes that have happened in the Russian defense industry and the lessons of the Russia-Ukraine war that may be of relevance to India. And he has highlighted 5 or 6 areas in which India-Russia defense relations can be taken forward. I think the two presentations have covered a very wide area, but they have some common features. Number one, there is a strong history to India-Russia relations. Secondly, the relationship cannot be like it was in the past. It has to be renewed. New drivers of cooperation have to be introduced both in the economic and in the defense field and in other fields as well. The international context is important. It is quite creditable that India-Russia relations have been fairly stable in this very unstable international situation. The expected impact, economic impact on Russia of sanctions has not materialized. In fact, Russia has succeeded considerably in facing up to the challenge of sanctions. Its economy has done far better than expected, particularly from the countries that had imposed the sanctions. Similarly, as Dr. Rajeshwar, General Rajeshwar said, even in the defense field, the defense industry of Russia and the military of Russia, which during the first year of the war, the widespread expectation, especially in the Western press and in India, we mostly read what is being republished from Western sources. Again, the Russian military has been able to regain its balance after the initial setbacks. And as General Rajeshwar correctly pointed out, a very significant point, the Russian defense industry has actually bounced back much stronger than it was before. And he rightly pointed out that once the conflict is over, and we do hope that the conflict is over sooner rather than later, there will be excess capacity in the Russian defense industry, which will be of relevance to India as well. What is also relevant is not just weapon systems themselves, but the new ways in which weapons are being used in the battlefield. The aspect relating to doctrine, and that too is something that we can benefit from. There is a historic precedent that General Rajeshwar himself mentioned between the late 70s and the 80s. India's transition to maneuver warfare, mobile warfare, was through the induction of the T-70s and the BMPs, and we then got it from the Soviets. So there is a historic precedent. I think both these presentations are important to correct some very popular misconceptions that are there in India, particularly on our relations with Russia and the broader international context. With these comments, I will open up the floor for questions and comments. I will read out a few to begin with, and I would then pass it on to those who have raised their hands. Dr. Behra has asked, what initiatives or strategies can be pursued to diversify trade between Russia and India beyond the traditional sectors? I think Valerija briefly mentioned it in her presentation, but I would request her to answer this question. I will put on one more question for General Rajeshwar while we move forward. What do you think are the main lessons from how the Russia-Ukraine conflict has progressed in terms of military lessons, particularly for the Indian Army? These are the two questions I will first pose to the two speakers. I'll start with Valerija first. The question related to what is it that we can do now to diversify our relations into new sectors, to add new strength. And then I will pass on the floor to General Rajeshwar. In the meantime, those of who are interested in asking questions may kindly put up their hand, the hand thing on the thing. I already see Dr. Charan Singh's hand up. I will give it to him as soon as the two questions have been answered. So Valerija, to you first, and then to General Rajeshwar.
Thank you, Dr. Varma. I will try to think it over, maybe all together with the representatives of this webinar. So first, how I understood it. So diversified trade, yeah, of course, the Indian side will not be very happy with the deficit to being the importer. But actually, I have the statistics of the export and import operations of India, and it is the large deficit in the external trade of India right now. So the imports in 2022 was $700 billion, even more, $720 billion, and vice versa, the export was equal to $453 billion. So it is the systemic situation in the Indian external trade that it imports more than it exports. Due to their high population, due to the situation in the manufacturing sector, but it can be changed. And as a short answer to Dr. Murari Behera question, what should we do to diversify this trade? Actually, I would say nothing right now, to wait. You're right, totally, Dr. Varma, concerning the question that we are all waiting for the military operation to finish, and do we have the certainty in our economic station, what we're going to do next. And what we're going to do with the defense sector as well, because as for example for US economy, it is focused on the military sphere, and that will mean that while that country stops have the military actions, lots of people will just lose their jobs, and in Russia we can't afford that. While being a civil citizen, I'm sure to say that all the Russians are quite peaceful. We're not fond of their actions which are, active in the military sphere. And we are eager to develop their other economic spheres. We now, being under sanctions, have biggest import substitution that ever happened. So practically agriculture is developing hard, like very fast. We substituted equipment. We already have a lot of natural resources to substitute their techniques and their equipment and electric sphere and machinery in everything. And I'm sure that we can exchange that with the Indian side, because I know that the specialists in the technological sphere in the Indian Republic, they are, developing, and the education has a high class right now. So we are eager to the workforce, to the exchange, to the scientific exchange, to the educational exchange with the Republic. So the brief answer to that question is we need to wait for a certainty, at least, referral certainty in our situation, and to exchange what we can do. If we know more about both economies, we can find the spheres in which we can diversify that trade. That was in brief. Thank you.
Thank you. General Rajeshwar?
Yeah, thank you, Ambassador Varma. I think it's a wonderful question. Actually, to be honest, the lessons have kept on evolving as we have gone forward. Initially, in the first phase, we found that the political and military aim, in the first phase of the battle, in the surge towards Kiev, was not coinciding. So that is why there was a bit of recoil, and things hadn't been thought through. But it quickly, within a month, the Russians went on to a consolidation phase and stabilized with minimizing their losses. And then was the battle which they forced the Ukrainians to actually attack them at a number of places and decimated their battle power. So that happened next. And the Russians also saw that in the initial stages, the air elements were not working out for them. So they waited. They modified, their tactics. They reorganized their armies. They started, in fact, they also got in at places the points of main effort of war reduced for them. And what they did was they forced the Ukrainians to actually go in for a counteroffensive with all their equipment at certain points where they had fortified their defenses with trenches, tetrapods, mines, and they consolidated their, their space on which they governed, which was these 4 oblasts. But what has also happened is over the period of the war, the ammunition equipment that they rebuilt, that was one. They introduced private military security companies, which was also a very learning thing for us, which can happen, whether it is opposite us or, since they had challenges of manpower. And they reorchestrated their battles called, sequencing. So they changed the sequence. And that, I think, made a lot of difference at the operational level. What can we learn to my mind, the first thing is we need to minimize war fronts in India. That means it would be better to fight on one front if we can afford rather than many fronts. This is important. The second is there has to be a thought process which I'm sure is there, but needs to disseminate a little more widely on the duration that we need to plan for. I think some of the Western armies, which I can see across in Europe, their thought process is to plan for minimum 30 days of intense fighting. This is how their doctrine, as I can read, is changing. So we also need to firm in our doctrine is the point. The third thing is the warfare is moving so fast that you are even seeing drones and missile warfare, which is happening at rapid pace. There are drones with AI. So I think a lot of decentralization is very important because you will not be able to control something which I think the Ukrainians were grappling with, having a plethora of systems, but not able to actually put them all together. So this is something we need to see how to decentralize to fight, and also how do we adapt ourselves to what is the social media environment during a war, because that I think puts a lot of pressure on all commanders, whether they are political, they are diplomatic, or they are war commanders. That I think is a battle of perception which we need to do better than what we are presently capable of. And a lot of reserve capacity is what we need to identify. So these are the takeaways that I can look at.
Thank you very much. I will now Dr. turn to Dheeraj, who's also requested the floor. But I will first ask Dr. Charan Singh to pose his question. One of the points that has been mentioned in the chat box, particularly is of China, and the China issue is also of some concern and interest in India. What is the nature of the Russia-China relationship? And it's something that we should all keep in mind. That is of interest to our audience as well. But to pose his comments or his questions. Sir, go ahead, please.
Thank you so much for giving me this chance. Valerija, thank you as an economist, I was very impressed with your presentation. You've given a real good overall view. We had a similar sanction when we did Pokhran under the Prime Minister Vajpayee. Our sanctions were also very strict and we survived it. I wanted to know from you, how have you, as a Master Varma mentioned in the beginning, that you have withstood the sanctions so well that you're performing better than the ones who did the sanctions on you. So I wanted to know, as an economist, what are the initiatives that were taken, fiscal and monetary, that you were able to successfully withstand the sanctions and do so well? The second question, Valerija, if you might have time and like to share, in India, we are now emphasizing a lot on tourism industry, especially medical and spiritual tourism. And that we feel in our country is going to boost our economy significantly. In the relationship, the last slide that you showed us, where we're looking forward towards relationship and building between our countries, does tourism figure in the strategy of Russia, India in your country? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Charan Singh. Practically, those are extremely interesting questions for myself because, I need to think it over. So concerning the initiatives to stem the sanctions that you asked me about. So first of all, as for fiscal, that was the total embargo actually for the export of the currency, of the foreign currency out of the Russian Federation. So nowadays we still have this burden. So some physical persons who, for example, do not represent Russia, who are not the residents in our country, they cannot export lots of currency. They cannot transfer currency to their accounts abroad, only in the amount of their wages. As for the citizens, we've got the limit of 1 million rubles, if I'm not mistaken, if it hasn't changed throughout the last months, because I didn't review the figure itself. So the foreign currency is forced to stay inside the country. First of all, to pay for the import, like for Indian import, for example, because you will not agree, to receive only Russian rubles. And that was the question in the chat practically about rupees. So they are also accumulated in the financial system of the Russian Federation. Nowadays, not all the contracts can be executed in their foreign currencies, in all kinds of foreign currencies. But that doesn't mean that it does not happen and that they are not nominated in those currencies. And rupees are also valid for their external trade, first of all. And again, what I was thinking over, so the reserves, the official reserves of the government can be held in different currencies, and that will lead only to the interconnection of their economies other than European Union and United States as their biggest centers of their economic activity. And as for tourism, and actually that is quite interesting that you mentioned that as for medical tourism in India, we all know about it. I mean the International Society. And about the spiritual tourism, I thought that only Russians are fond of going to India, to find out something more than just tourism and watching places and sea and ocean and so on. That's really true. And as for tourism, I mean outgoing tourism from Russia, it is one of the destinations which are highly great, which are highly developed and which are highly stimulated. As for, we call it, we in Russia, we've got the two lists of economies with which the relations differ. It is the, how to say, friendly economies and not friendly economies for the Russian Federation. And India is among the friendly economies, and that's why the tourism is promoted in this sphere. So the outgoing people who cannot now go to the European Union countries, for example, for the reasons of simple restrictions of living, because they don't have visas, they don't have the opportunity to pay, but so they can go to India, and they are promoted to go to India and to see places and to develop this sphere. If that was enough, I will be happy. If you need some things to think over, I'm glad to listen to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Yeah, pass on to the last person who will ask the question today. This is Dheeraj. Dheeraj, can you please unmute yourself and ask the question, please?
Hoping I'm audible. Thank you, Charanji, for asking the question on tourism. It was one of my questions. Thank you, all the dignitaries who are. I'm
Okay,
somehow unable to open it.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
so my question would be about.
Yeah, please.
Okay. It was about the distribution of how the companies are there. So 3 companies that you identified from the Indian side are all somehow owned by the Indian government, big corporations. And from the Russian sides, these are also big corporations. I mean, which we can understand the structure of the economy itself can be constituted of the big corporations. But how small businesses can be the part of the export-import thing. Second was how India's biggest exports are usually
so
IT
that's
products.
a good so that's a good question. Let we'll confine ourselves to that question. Basically, the question that Dheeraj is asking is, while the big companies are already active and taking part in what about these smaller companies, SMEs? How can they benefit from the interaction between India and Russia by making investments in Russia, or Russian companies coming to India and doing trade and establishing joint ventures, or putting up investments? You see, amongst the fastest growing large economies in the world. We have a very positive economic outlook. And if investments are made in India, the assurance. So I think the Russian industry, Russian companies should also look at opportunities in India, because as a growing economy, as a friendly country, like Russia treats India as a friendly country, we also treat Russia as a friendly country. I mean, of course, big businesses are welcome, but what can we do to encourage enterprise? Would you like to address that question, please?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, actually, I represent the SME myself. I had the experience of working for an export-oriented company which produces some parts for the automobile industry. And we actually interact with some of the countries abroad. In unfriendly countries, we used to work with them, and in friendly countries as well. And that is why I'm a little bit acquainted with the situation in the Russian economic sphere concerning the SMEs. Of course, it is the very great influence of the state-owned companies. And you know, for the Russian state, of course, the biggest taxpayers are the most, how to say, clear thing to rule and to cooperate with. And as for small and medium-sized enterprises, I'm sure that they're not so over-regulated in their activities, first of all. And secondly, this business B2B interaction, which is now happening very often in the sphere concerning the organization of our bilateral communication. Yeah, those road shows which happen all throughout the year with all the countries on the Shanghai Cooperation Organization base, maybe on the basis of BRICS companies, because like several months ago there was the BRICS summit concerning the fashion and industry. So it also happens for the small and medium-sized enterprises. As for us, we need more information, and as was also mentioned by Dr. Rajeshwar, that was concerning this social media sphere, which also should be promoted, which it should not be controlled. It should be promoted in an objective way for both sides, for both countries, to know more about ourselves. And we have that opportunity now with the open media sphere. So I hope that it will happen. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. One of the points that you did mention briefly, not India-Russia cooperation in multilateral fora. You, of course, made a point on it in your presentation, particularly in BRICS, in the expanded BRICS, and Russia is holding the BRICS presidency this year. And in terms of national currency payment system, that is also important in transforming global payments in a shift away from over dependence on we are running out of time, though I see one gentleman who wishes to ask a question. Can you identify yourself and ask your question? The person who's his name is Sonu Kumar, who's a journalist.
No question, sir.
And ask, can you ask the question very briefly, please? Thank you. Go ahead. Sonu ji.
No questions. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I believe
I
that
think-
Mr. Sonu said that there was no questions, no?
No question.
So I think we are having some difficulty in Sonu Kumar posing this question. We can leave it at that. May I very briefly summarize what the discussions were? I think we're all agreed. Both the presentations said that India and Russia have a very good record of time, though the foundations are very good. Second is that the current situation poses considerable challenges, both in the economic sphere and in the defense sphere. Both the speakers have enumerated India and Russia can look at to further reform, renew their relations going forward, both bilaterally and in multilateral fora. The fourth point is that we can learn. Rajeshwar said that we have a lot to gain from the experiences of the Russian military in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the reformed and re-strengthened Russian defense industry. Valerie mentioned in the economic sphere, in response to the question that Dr. Charan Singh asked, what were the instrumentalities of how Russia was able to re-stabilize its economy, but also move forward. That again is an issue of importance to us. But more importantly, I think there is a general interest in India and Russia coming together to renew their relationship for the future. Of course, the international situation is not so easy. It is quite troubled. We have the conflict ongoing, but there are other forms of conflict also taking place. The China factor is something that we find particularly that we need to take forward. In the multilateral fora, there are global trends that are taking place. Globalization and its challenges, including the weaponization of interdependence, sanctions, the responsible use of national currencies, but also creating resilient supply chains, cooperation in new technologies, cooperation in new transport areas, North-South corridor, Eastern Maritime corridor, but also creating between our people, our business interests, not just our governments, but our business interests, new links and new interest. The big companies may be interested, I think, from the Indian side, the Indian private sector should pay a little more attention to Russia. The big private sector, I think, is a little hesitant, partly because of the fear that they carry on the imposition of American secondary sanctions. The small and medium enterprises, of course, also are interested, as one of the questioner asked. That is something that we need to take forward. But more than that, I think the people of India and Russia should also reinforce their friendship and their engagement, because through the new generation, the younger generation, I think needs to find a way of building relations for the future. This has been an extremely useful session. I would like to thank Valerie, Dr. Valerie Mincicova from the Financial University of the Russian government, and General Rajeshwar for both their presentations and answering the questions very patiently. very diligently and in great detail. And there is something that we have all learned a lot. And thank you very much for this. I would like to thank Dr. Charan Singh for putting this together, for refocusing back on India-Russia relations. This has been a most useful session, and thank you for inviting me to chair the session. And with these words, I would like to hand over the floor back to Dr. Charan Singh. And in doing so, I would like to wish EGROW Foundation all the very best for their forthcoming webinar series. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Verma. That was so kind that you can agreed and that you've chaired the session so well. And of course, I want to thank both the speakers, Professor Valerija and General Rajeshwar, for giving us such a detailed discussion on such an important thing. I'm going to keep you informed when we do the next one every month. We will have one with a neighboring country and starting with BRICS. So you will have opportunities to come and participate with us. I'm sure you yourself have liked the discussion and benefited from it. We are going to put the recording on our website tomorrow. I'll send you the link so you can also share with others. As I mentioned, next week, Friday evening, we have the next webinar is on generative AI by Nobel laureate Mike Spence. And I would like to invite all of you because he's in New York. So we have done it at 6 p.m. in the evening. So I would invite all of you to kindly come and participate and benefit from the discussion as well as contribute in the discussion. Lastly, EGROW Foundation, under its endeavor to do financial literacy, runs a 1-hour online class every day on some contemporary topic or the other, and those are under different modules. I would like you to kindly take advantage of that. It's a very nominally priced, and if that can't be afforded, we waive the fee structure. It's basically giving back to the society, and the speakers there are amongst the best in our country, chief economists and of that level with different institutions who come and speak there, and professors from Delhi School or JNU are the speakers in that series. So I would request each one of you to look at our website and take advantage of those issues. Many of those discussions are international, not restricted only to India. So global citizens and global student scholars can also benefit from it. With that, let me once again thank each one of you, and to conclude, thank Ambassador, thank Professor, and thank General for being with us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.